From the studios of Staten Island Community Television, you're watching In the Bleachers, the TV show for the world's most passionate sports fans. And hello, everyone. I'm the team psychiatrist for the Minnesota Vikings, also known as Jaime Hixson.
Hi, I'm Tom Caulfield's agent, hopefully advising not to take the Philadelphia job, also known as Eric Rosen.
We are so happy that you could join us this evening, the second Monday of 2016. We got a lot to talk about, and we're going to see if we can try and get some telephone calls in. As of right now, Kenny Graham is on the other side of the glass. He's double dipping right now because he's actually going back and forth between the other side of the glass and his office taking care of some work. So in the meantime, we're going to try and take phone calls at 718-727-0143. And we've got episodes back up and running on YouTube and the In the Bleachers page on Facebook. So you can catch them at either site. You can also contact me personally on Instagram. And if you've got a story that you want told about anything that's going on here on the island, definitely get to us through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And boy, do we've got some stuff that we have to talk about today. Where do we even begin?
You know, considering it's award season and all that, let's hand out some awards from this weekend's football games. For the most boneheaded field goal attempt, congratulations, Blair Walsh, in the 10-9 loss to the Seattle Seahawks, which was unbelievable, of epic proportions. Let's get into the game. It was cold. It was minus 6 degrees going into the beginning of the game. On top of that, it was the third coldest game ever in NFL history, behind the Ice Bowl, in Green Bay, and of course the San Diego-Cincinnati game that was minus 9 degrees.
Yeah, they called that the Ice Box Bowl.
And that was Chris Collinsworth actually played in that game. And
yes, he did.
He called the game this week with Al Michaels on NBC.
What must he have been thinking, having taken part in two of the coldest games in playoff history? His own game with the Bengals and the one that took place yesterday.
At least in yesterday's game, he was in the press box. He didn't have to be on the field like the other players. They had warmers, they had bench warmers, they had underneath the field, they have hydraulics that because they play at TCF Bank Stadium. They've been playing there the last years, home of the Minnesota Golden Gophers college football team. And now, after the season, with the season over, they move into a brand new U.S. Bank Arena, which will be the host of Super Bowl 52.
Yep. And, of course, this year, the 50th anniversary of the Super Bowl is going to be celebrated in, if I'm not mistaken, Santa Clara, California.
Yep, Levi's Stadium.
Next year it's going to be in Houston. And the year after that, it's going to be in Minneapolis in the new stadium.
And that's the first time Minneapolis has hosted a Super Bowl since, I believe...
Super Bowl 26.
Inside the old Metrodome.
Yep, inside the old Metrodome when the Redskins outscored the Bills. Minneapolis has become a really great convention city because they've hosted Final Fours, they've hosted one Super Bowl, now they're going to host a second one in the next couple of years. Minneapolis is definitely the place to be if you want to have a convention there. The people are really, really nice. When you hear about the words Minnesota nice, it's for a reason. It's because the people over there treat you very, very kindly. And I should know because my daughter's from Minnesota, and she's over there right now working long and hard, and hopefully she's not drowning in her own sorrow after yesterday. But something tells me the Vikings are going to be in really good hands because even in spite of their disappointing loss yesterday, they're going to be in really good hands with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, all day Adrian taking the carries out of the backfield.
And how about Jared McKinnon, too, who played actually decently yesterday at the backfield. And then you got that young kid, Stephon Diggs, a very good receiver to throw to. Mike Wallace has really contributed very little, honestly. He's made some plays here and there, but it's really Stephon Diggs who's the main receiver, along with Kyle Rudolph. In fact, yesterday, it was 9-0 the game up until the fourth quarter. All three of those field goals by Blair Walsh. Then we get into the fourth quarter. This is the big game-changing play. On a really bad shotgun fumble, shotgun snap, the ball gets fumbled by Wilson. Then he picks up the ball, darts to his right, finds an open Tyler Lockett in the middle of the field, goes down the left sideline. He's tackled 4 yards shy of the touchdown. And then after that, it sets up the 4-yard touchdown play to Doug Baldwin that makes it 9-7, the only touchdown in the game.
That was the X factor in this game because it just goes to show you how terrific Russell Wilson is, not just as a quarterback, but as an overall football player. Not only, I've heard of turning nothing into something, but he really kept his composure in that. I mean, a poorly snapped ball, first off, and second of all, having the presence of mind to not only pick up the ball, but still be aware of his surroundings and see everybody was rushing towards him. There was nobody back defending the receiver on that play. Just an outstanding play by him. There's a reason why he's played in 2 Super Bowls and won a championship. And of course, with the final score, shouldn't we give the Seahawks defense a little bit of credit here? I mean, it would be easy to blame the place kicker. The real reason why the Vikings lost is because not once did they touch the end zone in the entire game.
In the last 6 or 7 weeks, the Seattle defense has only given up 1 offensive touchdown. That's really a testament to this team. They are number 1 in points allowed per game. They're number 1 against the run. They've given up about 78 yards a game this year. And on top of that, you look at what they did to AP in this game.
Yeah, 58 yards on 25 touches, not just carries, but catching the ball out of the backfield as well. Just a superior job by Seattle playing defensively yesterday, and it's not going to get any better for the opponent that they're going to be playing next week.
If you look in this game, too, the field goal by Stephen Houch, you get 10-9, then that penalty on Cam Chancellor, on Kyle Rudolph, and then all of a sudden, 27-yard field goal. The laces were in.
Yeah.
They should have been out.
Yeah. That's first of all, you can't really fault the long snapper there. That's the problem of the holder. The holder has got to do a better job of placing the football with the laces facing the goalpost as opposed to the kicker.
And because that went
ironically, Walsh wound up making a field goal, one of his 3 field goals, with the laces facing him.
I know it. And you know what? He became the 4th Minnesota player to miss a field goal in the playoffs. If you look at Morton Anderson, Gary Anderson, Eddie Murray, all of them in the playoffs, field goals botched.
Yeah.
Now, the next award I like to give out is to the idiot who basically got penalized way too many times and cost his team a victory. Congratulations, Vontaze Burfict. Come and get your award.
Yeah, I'd like to give out an award of my own. The guy that wound up getting away with murder, Joey Porter, a guy who never should have even been on the field in the first place, should have been penalized when you think about it. It should have been an unsportsmanlike conduct on the Steelers, but that's beside the point. The point is not only Vontaze Burfict, but what about Pac-Man Jones? Does that name sound familiar? Yep. Same Pac-Man Jones, who's had a very, very checkered past. Check out his rap sheet, if you will, for all of the problems that he's gotten himself into trouble with concerning legal issues. But the night before, a absolutely ludicrous penalty that he wound up drawing in that game.
I know, because he didn't like the fact that Joey Porter was in the field. Assistants are not allowed to be in the field. That's point blank. He shouldn't, unless you're a trainer or the head coach, you're not allowed to really be on the football field. And how about Mike Munchak being involved in one incident during the game, too? That was another problem right there. But in the end, you can blame all those people, but it really was Cincinnati that screwed themselves.
Big time.
They were down 15-0. And then all of a sudden, McCarron led them on 16 consecutive points. Eventually, of course, it was 16-15. Cincinnati has the ball. And what happens? Jeremy Hill fumbles the ball with about 1:42 left, giving Pittsburgh another opportunity. They go down the field, and then those pair of 15-yard penalties, Burfict, that was deserving.
Yeah.
You don't headbutt somebody like that and think you're going to get away with it. And then, that ludicrous call of Pac-Man Jones, that set up the game-winning field goal for Chris Boswell, 35 yards out, 14 seconds to go in the game. Pittsburgh wins 18-16, extending Cincinnati's playoff drought since 1990.
When we mentioned Porter briefly, this isn't the first time that Joey Porter has wound up drawing the ire of opponents. He was a good linebacker with the Steelers back in the day, and he caused quite a ruckus in the Super Bowl many years ago when he was ripping Jeremy Stevens of the Seahawks to pieces. Turns out Porter wound up having the last laugh because the Steelers beat the Seahawks in that Super Bowl in Detroit over a decade ago. But he has long been known for being a main instigator of opponents. Now, as far as the rest of the AFC field is concerned, can we please come to the conclusion now that it does take great quarterback play in order to lead your team to the next level? There's a difference between Alex Smith and whoever the Houston Texans have.
Brian Hoyer.
In this case, it's Brian Hoyer. How could you possibly think that the Texans could have had any chance in this game, especially with Hoyer committing 5 turnovers here? I mean, granted, Alex Smith didn't have the most eye-popping numbers, but he did exactly what he was supposed to do. And what about the hot streak that the Chiefs continue to be on? This is 11 in a row right now. And once again, the Chiefs show exactly how they're able to win games. They either win it with offense or defense. In this case, it was a combination of both.
To me, this game was like a cross between a colonoscopy and a root canal. It was so painful and just god-awful to watch. 5 turnovers, the 4 interceptions, the 1 fumble. At one point, you heard the fans even cheering for Brandon Weeden. When you have fans clamoring for Brandon Weeden to come on the field, then you really got a problem right there.
Yeah, Brandon Weeden was not going to be helping matters, I'll tell you right now. Anybody who saw him play with the Cowboys earlier this year should know exactly what I'm talking about.
But Bill O'Brien should have put Weeden on the field. He couldn't do any worse. At that point in the game, maybe he could have improved their chances. Who knows? Because remember when Hoyer TJ Yates got concussed and Weeden came in and he led them to a victory a few weeks back, and was on an opening. It was on a screen pass to Jalen Strong. By the way, where the hell is Jalen Strong in this game? He didn't get involved whatsoever. J.J. Watt had that groin injury. Jadeveon Clowney didn't even play 1 snap, who continues to have injury issues.
Yep.
It was just one thing after the other, and they lost 30-0. Did you see that opening kickoff touchdown by Niles Davis?
That was a huge swing of momentum that went the Chiefs' way. Not only did it give them the lead for good, it also silenced that Houston crowd that was looking for something, anything to try and cheer about, and it shut them up for the rest of the game. Just a wonderful, wonderful job of coaching that Andy Reid did in this one.
Coach of the Year candidate for sure.
Yeah, big-time Coach of the Year candidate. So now it's going to be the Chiefs and the Patriots in the AFC, along with Steelers and Broncos.
Yep, and believe me, I got my thumb with flags out, folks. And believe me, this is going to be an epic matchup. So, in the Chiefs-Patriots matchup, who do you pick?
I still like New England in this one. I still think that they've had plenty of time to make some of the adjustments that they're supposed to, but I really worry about what Kansas City's defense can do to them, because if the Patriots do not have their full horses available, there's going to be problems. There's still no Danny Amendola. Julian Edelman is basically 50-50 at this point. Good thing that they have Rob Gronkowski to go to as the other receiver, as the tight end, because if not, then the Patriots would really be having their trouble. I'm curious to know what kind of matchup there is to look out for when it comes to the Patriots' offense on the field and the Chiefs' defense on the field. Who is going to be the guy that has to take on Rob Gronkowski? If you take him out, then there's a chance you might be able to take the Patriots out altogether.
I pose to you this. Marcus Peters, the rookie cornerback for the Chiefs who came out of Louisville in the first round, I think it's going to be him and Julian Edelman. I think that's the matchup to look for, along with the linebacking core for Kansas City trying to help Peters out, too, against Edelman. Actually, no, the linebackers versus Rob Gronkowski. They're really going to have to play a big factor. And on top of that, you got to look at the Patriots' offensive line. They've had issues with Sebastian Vollmer, him being out for the year. So whoever takes his spot in this game is going to really have to look out for Justin Houston and Tom Bahali because they are a nightmare pass rushing duo. So it's really, the New England offense versus the KC defense. To me, that is really the ultimate matchup.
Yeah.
Whoever wins that, honestly, takes this game. And I'm going with Kansas City's defense to really stop Tom Brady, to give him some confusing looks, make sure he doesn't have any inclination of what's going to happen at the line of scrimmage, and really, converge on him and maybe cause some turnovers in this matchup. Because they don't have their horses at running back. They're the ones that they rely on, like Blount and
LeGarrette Blount. You're talking about.
Yeah, and Deion Lewis. They're not there. So they really have to rely on their receivers more so. And I think Kansas City secondary is going to have a good plan. I think that whole defense is going to have a good idea of what to do. And let's not forget, too, remember last year when Kansas City played New England Monday night?
Yeah, it was a 41-14 blowout at the hands of the Chiefs.
Yep. And what happened after that game? And that famous press conference by Belichick, we're on to Cincinnati.
Yeah. Say one thing about Coach Belichick. At least he's consistent. But as far as the other game in the AFC is concerned, you've got a classic confrontation, 2 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, both of whom are definitely destined for the Hall of Fame. I think Peyton Manning sooner than later.
Oh, yeah.
The question is, which Peyton Manning is going to show up? Because in spite of the fact that he's played in and won a championship, he's played in 3 Super Bowls in his career. He has that one championship to show. His playoff history is really, really mediocre. Not only that, but Ben Roethlisberger, probably one of the best big game players, not just quarterbacks in his sport, always is money in the bank in the playoffs. I mean, notice what he did in the Cincinnati game, putting them ahead for the majority of the game. For 3 quarters, the Steelers were the dominant team. But now this time, he's going up a step in class as far as opponents is concerned.
Well, in that game this past season, Brock Osweiler had that good first half for Denver over Pittsburgh. Because, at that time, Peyton Manning had that plantar fascia injury, and it was Denver who owned the first half, and then Pittsburgh came back in the second half to take that game. But if you look at the game against Cincinnati, Roethlisberger actually hurt his shoulder.
Yeah.
He just came in on that game-winning drive going 4 for 4 for about 36 yards that led him to the Chris Boswell field goal. He was asked by his coach, can you do it? And he said, sure. I got to give, he's got some boulders, all right, to come in with a not-so-good shoulder and be able to lead his team to a game-winning field goal. And also you have to credit the Cincinnati defense for screwing up, big time with those 2 15-yard penalties. But the fact is, Roethlisberger is good in big game situations.
And it just goes to show you exactly how that shoulder is, because he was still able to throw a dart to one of his receivers.
Antonio Brown.
Yeah, to Antonio Brown, which wound up helping to set up that field goal.
That's another thing, Antonio Brown. Remember, on that drive, he got hit pretty hard in the head by Burfict, and he was concussed. He was knocked out and was out of the game. Now, this is the question that's going to be posed to us. Will he play this week? He says he's going to play, but that's not up to him. That's up to the NFL concussion protocol.
Yeah, he has to go through protocol first before anything else, and at this rate, he's going to be lucky if he gets in for at least one play, because concussions are no joke.
By the way, I'm going with Kansas City to beat New England.
And I like New England to win this one over Kansas City. And as far as the other game, as soon as Pittsburgh made the playoffs over the Jets at the end of the regular season, they were my dog horse candidate. They have become more and more dangerous. Now that Big Ben is taking all of the snaps from center, this coming weekend is not going to be any different. I like Pittsburgh in this one, which means a Pittsburgh versus New England AFC championship the following weekend.
I am actually going with Denver for an all AFC West title game between Kansas City and Denver. I really want to see that take place. And I think Peyton Manning, because when he came back in the final week after Osweiler was having a terrible performance with those turnovers, I see him really charging on Peyton Manning and realizing the errors of his mistakes from this year.
And then there's the other game that wound up taking place over the weekend. Packers and Redskins.
It was all Redskins in the first quarter where they led 11-0, including the safety. Mm-hmm. And for the first time since 1984 in a playoff game that they got it.
And people started, Packer fans started sounding the alarm once again, thinking that this was basically a microcosm of the last 10 games of their regular season. But no.
Yeah.
You never, ever count Aaron Rodgers, another big game player, out of a game ever.
Well, it's the hurry up. That's what he did. He changed his approach. In the first quarter, it was the same, offense where they took time to snap the ball. This time, when he did the hurry up, and he caught them twice with too many men in the field, that was big right there in this game.
The other turning point was when Deshaun Jackson thought he had a touchdown after crossing the end zone. Turns out that he was stepping out of bounds with the ball at the half-yard line. Green Bay did a tremendous recovery defensively. They forced a field goal on that drive, and the next thing you know, the Packers wound up sealing the Redskins' fate by taking the lead with that touchdown to end the first half.
I know they were up 18-11 going into 17-11 going into halftime, and then Washington did get another touchdown. I believe it was Kirk Cousins on the ground. And it was 18-17 at that point. And that's when Green Bay went on that 18-point scoring strike, including with the touchdown to James Starks, and you had Eddie Lacy getting a rushing touchdown. It was just all Green Bay in the second half, and they ended up winning 35-18.
And a good job by the Packer defense really putting the pressure on Kirk Cousins the way they did.
So you got Carolina-Seattle in the first division of the first of the two division games.
And I'm picking Seattle in this one. They're really peaking at the right time. As far as that other game goes, Green Bay and Arizona, that's a really difficult game to figure out because you have an Arizona squad that's played just tremendously all season. Not as good defensively this year as they were last year, but they make up for that by having a really hot quarterback in Carson Palmer.
They actually had a top 10 defense this year, and even without Todd Bowles as defense coordinator, they still had a decent defense this year. And yes, Carson Palmer, as you mentioned.
They weren't as aggressive this year defensively as they were last year. They were solid, but it was really the offense, specifically Palmer, that wound up carrying the way for them. Going up against a Green Bay team that's got so much riding on them after that Washington performance this past weekend. For the record, I'm picking Green Bay and Seattle, which means a
rematch.
Yeah, a rematch of last year's championship game. And if it were to happen, the scene would shift to Green Bay.
I actually am going with Green Bay, and I'm actually going with Seattle too. I was leaning towards Carolina because let's not forget, they play each other this year in Seattle, which is not an easy place to play in. They were down 23-14, Carolina, in the fourth quarter. And what happened? Cam Newton led Carolina on two game-winning 80-yard drives, including the game-winning touchdown with 23 seconds to go to Greg Olsen, right behind Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman, in the right corner of the end zone. 27-23, they didn't win. But let's not forget last year's playoff game, because they played each other in the divisional round last year.
Right.
In Seattle, and Seattle won 31-17.
Yeah.
Including that pick six by Cam Chancellor. Could that happen again this year?
Could it happen again? Yes. Will it happen again? We just don't know yet. But right now, there's some matchup issues to talk about regarding Seahawks and Panthers, as well as Packers and Cardinals.
To me, the Seattle-Carolina game, it's Seattle's defense trying to contain Cam Newton, because that guy is not easy. He's one of the best running dual threat or two-way quarterbacks in the NFL.
You've got two scrambling quarterbacks, each of whom has been dynamic in their own way, although I think Russell Wilson is a better playmaker than Cam Newton is. He's really shown it before. And you also have two guys with contrasting styles. You have Wilson, a much shorter quarterback who's got great hands, and Cam Newton, a big, strong, powerfully built guy who has not necessarily been accurate, but is able to also make plays happen by running all over the place. Which guy is going to be the one that's going to make the big play in this game?
To me, you got to look for Doug Baldwin. Because we've all talked about Seattle's ability to run the ground, and that's true. But if you look at the last 7 games of the regular season, Russell Wilson has had 24 touchdowns to 1 interception. And the majority of those touchdowns, 13 or 14 of which went to Doug Baldwin, who's been a really good go-to receiver. So if I am Carolina's secondary, especially Josh Norman, that's the matchup really to look for. Josh Norman versus Doug Baldwin right there. That really could be a telling sign. And the other matchup to look for is Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor trying to contain Greg Olsen this time.
Yeah.
Those are really 2, I think, pivotal matches that could really give us a look into who wins. As for the other game, matchup-wise, I would say the Green Bay defense trying to contain Carson Palmer. Really trying to rush, trying to get to him and stack him really good. And you know what? Because remember the last time that Green Bay played Arizona? Arizona destroyed them 38-8.
Yeah.
They gave up, I believe, it was 7 sacks in that game.
Mm-hmm. Green Bay was a different team at that time. That was the slumping Packers. The Cardinals are going up against a totally different Packers team right now. They're getting a little bit more healthy, and they have most of their horses back defensively. So this is going to be a totally different game to watch.
Oh, without a doubt. And then you look at the other matchup, really, Devontae Adams, I think, could be the X factor for Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
He had he made a big touchdown last week. I think this week he could possibly get 2. As for my X factor for Arizona is going to be their running back, David Johnson.
Yep.
Moving the chains, keeping Rodgers off the field. So there's a lot of good storylines. Bruce Arians, of course, versus Tom McCarthy. Pete Carroll versus Ron Rivera. All excellent coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to like Mike Tomlin versus Gary Kubiak.
Yep. Of course, Pete Carroll, always a great, great defensive line. Rivera basically has had his job saved. He's looked pretty good because his teams have made the playoffs 3 years running.
And the division winning 3 straight years.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as what's going on outside of the NFL, a lot of the talk has been about who is going to get hired where. We already know that Tom Coughlin resigned, and if you saw the end of his press conference, you saw him give Mr. Tisch the cold shoulder. I think there was a little bit of friction going on between Tom Coughlin and Steve Tisch, if you ask me. Now, he's already interviewed with the Eagles, Tom Coughlin has, and supposedly the 49ers are going to try and get permission from the Giants to interview him as well.
And he was possibly considered for the Dolphins job, but instead, you know what? They said because of his age that they didn't hire him. And you know who? They were the first team to hire a coach. And who did they get? Adam Gase, former offensive coordinator with the Denver Broncos and with the 1-year stint in Chicago following John Fox, the head coach.
Mm-hmm.
He became the youngest NFL head coach at the age of 37. He's going to get all the power to make plays, of course, on offense and decide the 53-man roster.
Yeah, but the big question to ask here is their quarterback, Ryan Tannehill, going to be a part of that roster, or are the Dolphins going to go elsewhere to get another quarterback?
He's been disappointing 4 years. He's been 29-35 as a starter. His passer rating has been abysmal at, I believe, 60-70. His touchdown rate is not off the charts. He really needs Adam Gase coming, because look what he did in 2013 with Peyton Manning and that team. He had a record of over 5,400 yards that year. That team scored 606 points. Yes, they did lose to Seattle in the Super Bowl 33-8, but he did wonders with him. How about with Tim Tebow in 2011 when he was an assistant, when they won the playoffs that year? And, you know, you may not see it, but last year with Jay Cutler, he improved his passer rating to 90.2, and he lessened his turnovers. Maybe he could do the same thing with Tannehill.
Well, let's be honest. Working with Jay Cutler is definitely nothing to brag about. Why should working with Ryan Tannehill be any different? It's time for the Dolphins to start from scratch this time. As far as what's going on with our neck of the woods, now that Tom Coughlin is gone, they've already interviewed their 2 in-house candidates, Ben McAdoo and Steve Spagnuolo. They're going to try and get an interview with Hugh Jackson, who's the O coordinator with the Bengals right now. Right now, all signs point to either McAdoo because of his relationship with Eli Manning, or maybe Hugh Jackson being the guy. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the Giants gave a phone call to Doug Marrone.
They already did. They already got an interview with him. In fact, Doug Marrone and Ben McAdoo are the top 2 candidates.
This would be a dream job for Doug Marrone, a Bronx kid who went to DeWitt Clinton, played college ball at Syracuse, coached at Syracuse in between NFL jobs.
Was an offense coordinator before the Syracuse job with the New Orleans Saints, and then he left. He became the head coach for the Bills. But the problem with him is the way in which he left the Bills.
Yeah.
Was one of the most bizarre things that might be a little off-putting for any GM to take on. Granted, he was with the Jaguars last year.
And speaking of the Bills, Rob Ryan is going to join his brother Rex on the Bills coaching staff.
Ooh. I honestly would caution against doing that.
Yeah.
Because God forbid if there's a mistake and all that, family or no family, some words could be thrown around. Some unforgivable words could be thrown around. So I would never, ever hire family whatsoever if I'm a head coach.
Not only that, but look at some of the places where he's been as a D coordinator. He's been in Cleveland. He's been in Dallas,
New
where his
Orleans.
defenses have failed miserably. He had one shining moment in New Orleans. Other than that, he has not necessarily been that great as a D coordinator.
Yeah, I wouldn't hire Jerry Garcia's ghost any time of the day. But no, beyond that, being serious and all that, I just would. If I'm Rex Ryan, I think it's a huge mistake. I think you got something good with Doug Thurman. Leave it with him and with Greg Roman. As for the other candidates, you got Mike Smith and you got Doug McDermott, the defensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers that the Giants are considering.
And there's one other vacancy as well. We mentioned the Giants. We mentioned that the Dolphins vacancy has been filled. What about the Cleveland Browns? They've already cleaned house. Now they're going to see if they can get some words of wisdom from, of all people, the former Mets executive, Paul DePodesta.
Which is really ironic to have a baseball guy being the consultant. Maybe he could bring his Moneyball strategy to the team.
Because he has worked with Billy Beane in Oakland in the past, and he has been a boss with the Dodgers, and he also was most recently in the front office of the Mets. Maybe he could use some of those sabermetrics tricks that he learned from Mr. Beane in Oakland and try and apply them to Cleveland. But he's got to be really, really creative and very, very careful what he does in Cleveland.
I think letting Mike Lombardi go a few years back was a mistake on their part of Mike Haslam, the owner. And now hiring Ray Farmer was an absolute disaster. And they're not even hiring a GM first. They're going for their head coach before they do a GM, which I think
is backwards.
Very
you need to have somebody determine who the head coach should be. I mean, who's to say that the general manager and the head coach are not even going to work well together?
Exactly. That's going to be a huge issue right there. And look at the guys. They're considering Terrell Austin, just like the Giants and so many other teams from Detroit, the defense coordinator. Doug Marrone is there. Sean McDermott from Carolina. Defensive backs coach Jerome Henderson from the Cowboys. Matt Patricia, the defensive coordinator from the Patriots. Offense coordinator Hugh Jackson, of course, who is coaching the fellow Ohio team who's with the Cincinnati Bengals, and Paul Gunther, the Cincinnati defensive coordinator. So there's a lot of candidates. I don't know. I think Matt Patricia. I actually think he'll be the head coach. Or Hugh Jackson, either one of them.
Exactly what the Browns need right now. Somebody else who's unproven and has not given any patience whatsoever. This is why the Browns have been under 500 for the last, more than a quarter century right now. Number one, there's absolutely zero patience by management. Number two, literally, no one knows what they're doing in that front office.
Oh, they don't know. They're like chickens with their heads cut off. You don't know what direction they're going to go into. It's a complete, utter damn mess.
They're going to have their 8th head coach in the last 17 years, and they have, 25 different starting quarterbacks in that span?
24, but, it's just, it doesn't matter. 24, 25, they really need to go and get themselves that guy. I'm not saying a franchise, but somebody that actually will work well with the team, not spend his time in Vegas and be an amateur or be selfish. But anyway, here are some of the other jobs. You got the Tennessee Titans. Mike Mularkey right now is the only person on their radar. They're considering going from interim to permanent. The Buccaneers, you got Dirk Cutter, the coordinator from the offense coordinator from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Sean McDermott from Carolina, and Harold Goodwin, the Arizona offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And then, because he did really well the last 2 years with Carson Palmer. And then the 49ers, you mentioned Chip Kelly, Cutter as well. John DeFilippo, the offense coordinator from Cleveland. Why? Hugh Jackson, running backs coach Anthony Lynn from the Buffalo Bills, and Mike Shanahan.
Yeah.
And then there's also the Eagles. There's McAdoo, Doug Peterson from Kansas City, Pat Shurmur, who was the interim coach for the final game of the year, Terrell Austin, Tom Coughlin, and Paul Gunther.
Yeah.
So all 7 of these teams, if I'm the Giants, I go with McAdoo. Continuity.
Ben McAdoo, yeah. Plus, there's that relationship that he's developed with Eli Manning. The two have become basically the best of friends on that offense.
If I'm the Philadelphia Eagles, I go with, I think, Doug Peterson from Kansas City. You know, since he worked under Andy Reid and all that, he could bring some of that magic back to the Eagles. If I'm the Cleveland Browns, I like Matt Patricia, honestly. I think he could really do something with that team and help their defense, especially against the run. And then the Tennessee Titans, stick with Mike Mularkey. You know what? Give him another shot. Let's see where this goes. Maybe go for Terrell Austin or Chip Kelly, possibly. Buccaneers, if I'm them, I would say go with Harold Goodwin from Arizona.
True.
And then if you're the 49ers, you know what? Roll the dice. Hugh Jackson. Let him go back to the West Coast.
Now, in the college circuit, it has come down to this. 2 teams, 1 goal, and that's the national championship. A couple of days ago, they decided the 1AA national title, and North Dakota State wound up winning the 1AA title. And
They're great, that team.
Yeah, that's 5 consecutive national titles that North Dakota State has won in what's now called the Football Championship Subdivision.
Why don't they call it the Bison Bowl?
Well, there you go. Now, in the big level of college football, it's Alabama and Clemson. Southeastern Conference versus ACC. Derrick Henry versus Deshaun Watson. Nick Saban, who's won 4 national titles at the college level, 3 of them with Alabama. Dabo Swinney,
Who's never won a title at all.
but has been able to turn things around in Clemson. By the way, Dabo Swinney happens to be an Alabama native.
Yeah, he went to Alabama. He played at Alabama as a wide receiver.
What must his emotions be right now going up against his alma mater for the national championship?
You know how he got into the Clemson job? He replaced Tommy Bowden mid-season 08. He was almost let go, actually, in 2010 after a really bad 6-7 season.
Yeah.
But then finally they gave him another shot, and look what he's produced for Clemson. When you had Taj Boyd, and now you have Deshaun Watson, who's 10 times what Taj Boyd was. And it's really, for him as an Alabama fan and a player and a graduate there, yeah, it's really got to be emotional, but he's not going to let that get to him because his focus is on Clemson and Clemson only to get this title, to be 14-0, to win their first championship since 1981. This is
And their second overall.
And for Nick Saban, if he wins this, what's else for him to do? Possibly go to the NFL, but I think that would be a mistake considering he wouldn't have the kind of autonomy in the NFL that he has in college.
Yeah, and he's already made it loud and clear. He's really comfortable coaching at Alabama. Not only that, but he has a chance to chase history. He's won 3 national titles at Alabama, 1 at LSU.
But never in the college football playoff era.
This time, not only would he win his 5th national title, it would be his 4th at Alabama, which would put him 2 away from Bear Bryant. Can you imagine what kind of legend he would carve for himself in Tuscaloosa if he were to pass the Bear?
The Bear, who had 6 national titles back in the day. And he was the standard bearer for college football coaches.
It's been over 30 years since Bear Bryant passed away. He is still revered in Tuscaloosa. They still wear the plaid fedoras in his honor in the stands.
I would too. You know what? They were great hats in those days. But you look at the two coaches. That was when he's had 5 straight 10-win seasons with this team at Clemson. And, he was part of the 92 national title team, in fact. He was there as an assistant from 93 to 2000 with them. And then, you know what? How about Nick Saban? They did have that legendary loss to Auburn in the Iron Bowl.
Yeah.
But if you look at Clemson, when they have the ball on offense, who's the main man?
It's Derrick Henry.
No, with Clemson on
Oh,
offense.
for Clemson, it's Deshaun Watson.
And what's unbelievable, about Deshaun Watson this year, he was second in the voting for the Heisman Trophy this year. He had third in the Heisman voting, 41 touchdowns on the season. But they have a spread offense. He's a two-way quarterback. Alabama has such issues on defense against guys like Deshaun Watson. That could be a huge issue. Even though they have a front seven that's given up only 71 yards on the ground per game this year. But again, they've never faced a guy the likes of Watson and Wayne Goldman. It's a crazy spread offense
again,
they have.
Clemson has never faced a team like Alabama this season or in a long, long time. And you consider all of the athletes. When you think of Alabama, as great as Derrick Henry is coming out of the backfield, the athletes that they have defensively are just out of this planet. The speed that they have, rushing the quarterback and tracking down receivers is just astronomical.
Well, you got Ashawn Robinson, Jaron Reed, Jonathan Allen. These are guys who are probably going to be going to the pros at some point, along with Derrick Henry, who's going to be an NFL player next year. It's going to happen, folks. And he has over 2,000 yards on the ground this year. And what's been a crazy season, he's had consecutive games of over 125, 150 plus yards on the ground. He's 6'3". He's a physical beast, very punishing. But then there's the other receiver, Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
Because you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if Clemson lined 7 people in the box just to stop Henry. And they might, leave it to a one-on-one between Calvin Ridley and Clemson's shutdown corner, Mackenzie Alexander, who's being projected as a top 15 player.
Right.
So there are going to be some really good matchups to look for. I honestly think, though, this is Clemson's year. This is their title. I'm going with Dabo Swinney and the Tigers to bring it back to South Carolina.
As great of a story as it would be for Clemson, Alabama's just too good. They're too good defensively. They're too good at coming out of running back. Quarterback, they're actually very, very solid. I think this is all Alabama all the time in this one. Alabama wins that 4th national title for Nick Saban. And how many national titles in that program's history?
For them, it'd be, I think, their 11th or 12th national championship.
Because they have set the gold standard for college football down in the state of Alabama.
How about in college basketball now? We're 2 months from now will be March Madness. And we're just seeing all these teams come. Like Kansas is still number 1. They had a 109, 106 triple overtime victory over Oklahoma, and yet they're still the top 2 teams.
Yep.
Because you look at Buddy Hield's performance, he had 46 points in that game.
And for the record, Alabama has a grand total of 19 national titles. 15 of them are claimed national titles. 4 of them are unclaimed.
So the new number 1, you got Kansas Jayhawks. They're number 1 still.
And then there's Oklahoma.
At number 2 because of Buddy Hield. Number 3, it's the Mel Trimbo and Diamond Stone show.
There you go.
I think Diamond Stone should be freshman of the year with the way he's playing. Michigan State, Denzel Valentine finally came back, after a 4-game absence. But Bryn Forbes, he's been really good in his absence.
Yep.
North Carolina Tar Heels, you got Bryce Johnson, who did well this week against Florida State and Syracuse. And they're just waiting for Kennedy Meeks to get back. The Wildcats, Villanova at number 6. Against Seton Hall and Butler, they did go 8 of 37 from 3-point range this week, but they live and die by the 3 at times.
Yeah.
I think they really need to change it up a bit, but they still got the victories. The Musketeers of Xavier, number 7. Edmund Sumner, recovering from that scary injury. And they did have 17 turnover against St. John's this past week.
Yeah, and St. John's has really taken a nosedive. They've lost 7 in a row already, including a really, really disappointing loss recently at home to Xavier. And now they've got the big Georgetown game at the Garden coming up in a couple of nights.
The only thing good about that is the fact that they have a storied history with those two. Other than that, I wouldn't even buy a single ticket to go see that massacre that Georgetown's going to impose.
Well, you never know. Georgetown's been pretty unpredictable this season. They win games they're supposed to lose. They lose games they're supposed to win.
And
technically, this is a game they're supposed to win.
And the Miami Hurricanes, the number 8 in the country, they had big victories against Mississippi State, Utah, and Butler in the Puerto Rico tip-off. You got some really good players like Angel Rodriguez and the rest of the gang. They've won 7 straight games. The Blue Devils of Duke, ever since the Utah loss, they've really come into their own. And you got Mason Plumlee, who's been really the X factor. He's avoided foul trouble. He's had at least 31 minutes in each of the last 4 games. The SMU Mustangs are probably the greatest story. The fact that they're not even going to play in the postseason, and they're still one of the only 2 undefeated teams. Keith Frazier, the guy who's been at the center of the whole scandal, he left for personal reasons.
Yeah.
The West Virginia Mountaineers, the team that is great at turning the ball over, but yet their offense needs some tweaking. They cause way too many fouls. They're number 11th. 12th, the Providence Friars.
Yeah.
Chris Dunn, Player of the Year. Number 13, Virginia Cavaliers. Undefeated. They were undefeated, but they lost to both the tech schools this past week. They can't do that this coming week if they want to really get their 3rd straight ACC title. Kentucky, talk about a fall from grace.
Yeah, I checked out their recent game with LSU. That highly touted freshman, Ben Simmons.
Oh, great player.
Yeah, he had a rather quiet game that night, but LSU is definitely a team to watch for.
Scott Labasserie is really more hype than anything else.
Yeah.
Number 15, A&M Aggies of Texas, unbelievable. Jalen Jones, Tyler Davis, they're really a good team together. Then the Iowa Hawkeyes at number 16.
Yeah, Iowa has really come into their own this season.
Jarrett Utoth and Mike Gessel, probably one of the best duos in the country. The Iowa State Cyclones at number 17, just the lack of fouls and the lack of effort, are just really showing. The Arizona Wildcats are a mash ward.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they've lost a couple of guys to injury. Just recently, they dropped a really, really disappointing game to USC. I think it was the 4 overtime game that they wound up dropping to USC in L.A.
And UCLA. Mm-hmm. And not only that, Alonzo Trier, next 4 to 6 weeks with a broken shooting hand.
Yeah.
Along with the ACL injuries. The Gamecocks, the other undefeated team left.
How about the job Frank Martin has done for the Gamecocks, taking that team from out of nowhere to a top 25 ranking right now?
2 ingredients, protecting the rim and getting the opposition to foul trouble. That's really makes his team very well. 10 straight victories for the Pittsburgh Panthers. They have Louisville this Thursday.
Yeah, big game in the ACC.
Speaking of which, Louisville, number 21. Very few quality wins this year.
Yeah.
If they get a win against Pittsburgh, that could really help their resume for March. The Baylor Bears, they did beat Oklahoma State, even though they lost to Kansas last weekend. The Purdue Boilermakers, it's just really not something that I'm not liking this year from this team. And then you also have the Connecticut Huskies at 23, really need to improve, and Gonzaga at number 25. Their last 4 games have been against teams in the top 200, outside the top 200, and that's all of college basketball.
Now, as far as the NBA is concerned, I see the Knicks wound up getting themselves back on the winning track just last night, getting a big win against Milwaukee. They're now 1 game under 500 as they approach the halfway point of the season. Who would have thought?
19 wins.
19 wins, 2 more than they had all of last season.
Yep.
Now, as far as the Brooklyn Nets, we go from the sublime to the ridiculous. They already demoted, quote-unquote, Billy King as the GM, and they fired Lionel Hollins. This just goes to show you...
About time.
Yeah, it just goes to show you that you cannot try and buy your way to a championship. Ever since they made that trade with the Celtics to get Garnett and Pierce and
Joe Johnson with the
and also making the trades for Joe Johnson, trying to buy their way to a championship and sacrificing countless draft picks in the process, it has failed miserably for them. And now the Nets are failing miserably this season and really paying the price in more ways than one. And to make matters worse, they don't have one single draft pick coming up this summer.
Which is really going to hurt them considering, they're probably going to be in the lottery situation in the top 5 Maybe top 6.
That lottery pick is going to go to the Celtics. Just goes to show you how certain franchises in professional sports are run. The Celtics have 17 NBA titles for a reason, because they're one of the best-run organizations in professional sports. And the Nets are as star-crossed as they are for a reason, because no one knows what they're doing in that front office.
And if I'm a Nets fan, I would avoid watching them play San Antonio tonight.
It's only going to get uglier.
And
for the record, Tony Brown took over as the interim coach.
Yikes. As for the Rangers, they had a win and a loss this past week, winning against Dallas, but they did lose in overtime to the Washington Capitals, who are the number 1 team in the NHL. In fact, congratulations to Alex Ovechkin. 501 career goals, 42nd all-time in the NHL.
Speaking of big goal scorers, for the record, Alex Ovechkin has become just such a dynamic player for them. But what about soon-to-be 44-year-old Jaromir Jagr, already 3rd on the all-time goal-scoring list? He has still not lost a step in his skating ability.
And with the Florida Panthers, probably one of the greatest stories in the NHL, 12 consecutive victories when they had 14-12-4 as their record, and they've gone this 12-game winning streak. Jaromir Jagr being a part of it, along with Roberto Luongo, who's got a 9.4 save percentage. This South Florida team is out of the basement. They're leading their Atlantic Division, and they're second overall in the leading the Atlantic Division, second in the Eastern Conference behind the NHL leading Washington Capitals. I feel like I'm either in the Twilight Zone. I don't know if this is real. Please pinch me.
I don't know about that.
No, but really, because, who would have thought that the Florida Panthers would be where they are right now? Mm-hmm. As for the Rangers, I
just hope that they're getting enough fan support now that they have this streak going. But you mentioned the Rangers. They're actually playing right now, and they just completed a scoreless first period with the Boston Bruins. But the Rangers have been one team that has slumped badly the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 weeks or so.
Yeah, they started with 16 victories on the year. They had 16 wins, 3 losses, no overtime or non-regulation losses. But nonetheless, they've gone on a bit of a slump the last few weeks. I think things will turn around. I think they will make the playoffs as usual, because they sometimes do that, the Rangers. Whether they'll start bad and then finish good. I think this time, they're gonna finish good for the last few months. They're gonna get that playoff spot. I believe they'll probably get a 6 or 7 spot along with the Devils.
And just last night, speaking of the Devils, they wound up getting a huge win over the Bruins over the weekend.
They lost 4-1 to them.
Oh, I'm thinking of somebody else. Let me try and check the
Islanders,
scoreboard from over the weekend. Here we are. Last night. Oh, wrong one.
Oh, they had the Minnesota Wild last night. They beat. That's right. They did get a victory against Minnesota Wild.
Yep, the Devils wound up winning 2-1 over the Wild. Big win for the Devils. Now, tonight, we mentioned that the Rangers are already in the first intermission, scoreless tie with the Bruins. Plain and simple, the Rangers need a win in the worst way.
And how about some of the big events coming up this week? A week from today, because we're going to be off the air on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the first Grand Slam of the tennis season gets underway. The Australian Open from Melbourne, which is very hot. It's like 100-degree weather.
Yeah.
There's shade, of course, in the stadium, and the games are played when you and I are pretty much asleep because of the time difference.
And ESPN still broadcasts the matches anyway.
In the men's circuit, it's really Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, Stanislav Wawrinka, Rafael Nadal. Those, to me, are the 4 guys to look at that could possibly win. Maybe Joe Wilfried Tsonga could play a part in this.
Quite possibly.
And as for the women, of course, the talk is actually the injuries. There are a lot of injuries to some of the top players. Simona Halep was injured, had an Achilles problem. Sharapova withdrew from the Brisbane International as well last week with a groin, I think, with some shoulder issues. Lucia Safarova withdrew from the Australian Open because of health issues. And Kvitova withdrew from the Shenzhen Open because of illness. Stosur, wrist injury. We might see an unknown female tennis player take it, or maybe Serena Williams will do what she failed to do at the U.S. Open.
Yeah.
Tie the great, Steffi Graf for the most championships in the open air. She only has 21 at the moment.
Yeah.
She gets this 22nd. she makes history.
Yeah, it's amazing the dominance that this young woman has had for her career.
And how about Federer, too, in his 30s? He's still playing at a high level.
Yep.
Both of them are in their 30s. They're playing like they're in their 20s. I hope to see either one of them win. Of course, my mom will definitely be cheering for Roger Federer. That's her man.
Yeah.
As for the Baseball Hall of Fame, wow, what an announcement for the ages for both guys.
Yep. Ken Griffey Jr. was this close to setting a record by basically sweeping the ballot, getting, I think it was 417 out of 420 votes.
That's a record 99.32% for a guy who spent most of his career as a Seattle Mariner, spent 8 years with the Reds, but really he'll go in as a Mariner, 13-time All-Star, 10-time Silver Slugger winner, and 8 straight games with home runs. That ties a record with Don Mattingly and Dale Long.
Mm-hmm. There was also the issue of Mike Piazza, who finally made the Hall after being on the ballot for 10 years.
And what's unbelievable, he did get in with 83% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
And he played years, 92, 98 with the Dodgers. He was with the Marlins for a little bit of a stint. But then you had the craziest trade. He was traded to the Florida Marlins, and Marlins got Preston Wilson, Ed Yarnall, and Jeff Goetz.
Yeah.
Nobody will remember them ever again, except right now because I just mentioned them. And when he came to the Mets, remember that day he just came from the airport?
Yeah.
And he came out to the crowd, and they were clamoring for him?
Yeah. And there was a time when Piazza was really uncomfortable with his surroundings in New York, but it was just a matter of time before he wound up really, really accepting the city life, the borough life that is here, and also the fans as well, because as we all know, Met fans are notorious for being not just demanding, but for being very, very impatient, especially considering the past history that they've had. But Piazza gave them 7.5 great seasons. He was a dynamic hitter, and it's just a matter of time before we see him giving his speech up in Cooperstown later this summer.
I can't wait. 396 home runs, the most for a catcher ever. 12 All-Star appearances. He was the Rookie of the Year in 93 when he played for them. And you know what? If it wasn't for Tommy Lasorda, he wouldn't even been selected by the Dodgers.
Yeah, Tommy Lasorda is Mike Piazza's godfather, and even after he got traded, Lasorda had a very close relationship with Tommy.
He was a part of 2 no-hitters with Ramon Martinez and Hideo Nomo too.
Yep, Piazza had a very close relationship with Tommy Lasorda. If I'm not mistaken, I think he was a 62nd round draft pick in 1988 out of junior college.
He was originally a first baseman, but then Lasorda talked him into being a catcher so he can get more playing time. And you know what? It's worked out for everybody. Probably one of the best contact hitting catchers of all time. And honestly, this guy is just humble. You could see.
And for the record, Mike Piazza was on the Hall of Fame ballot for 3 years, not 10. Sorry about that.
83%. And you know what? Jeff Bagwell was less than 4% shy of getting the necessary 75% votes. I think he'll get in next year.
Quite possibly.
And I hope he does.
And there's also the matter of who's on the ballot for next year. One guy to watch out for, Manny Ramirez.
I know. And, that's going to be very tough considering he rubbed people. And you know how the baseball writers judge on personality?
He never, ever had a good relationship with the media. He hated talking to reporters. Although, of course, part of that was the language barrier, because when he first got into the game, his English wasn't very good. But as he got older, he became a little bit more accustomed to hanging out with teammates. But he always kept the media at arm's length.
I know, and because of that could be the reason that they don't vote him. I hope that's not the case, But there are times where personality does play a factor and character. But I'm very thrilled for these 2 individuals, very deserving.
And what's even more thrilling, less than 7 weeks to go before pitchers and catchers report.
And I cannot wait for that.
And on that note, we're going to say thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Kenny Graham on the other side of the glass. Thank you, of course, Eric, for joining us.
As always, I love being a part of the show.
For everyone here, I'm Jaime.
And I'm Eric.
Good night, everyone.
Congratulations, Leo.